All right guys, James from SIKKY Manufacturing. Finally get to introduce this next project we're working on. And we're gonna be covering this car complete front to back build series. So we're gonna show you everything we gotta do from start to finish. Kind of like a step-by-step install guide. So, take you out back here so we can get a look at this beaut. Haven't got to mess with it all yet. We did do some burnouts in it and some donuts, but haven't really done much. But it's a fine specimen. Got it at an auction, so I had that typical engine issue that the FRS BRZ is known for, which I guess in this particular customer's case they opted to total the car, but it's in great shape, nothing wrong with it, and we're obviously putting an LS in it, so it has no bearing on our project. So let's check it out. A little dirty, but it's definitely going to work for what we want to do. I just realized the battery might actually be dead. It's been sitting so long. Let's see if we get any luck here. Oh yeah, and I did Yeti went for a ride in this thing once or twice, so I have to clean that up. And she runs. Not bad. Can't wait to get this thing started. So, like I said, we're gonna try to cover this thing almost like a step-by-step install guide for the LS swap. Try to give you guys that are gonna attempt this on your own as much information as possible to make it easier and hopefully get you out of situations where you don't know what you should have done or which direction to go, and try to work out, you know, the different steps of like with timing of when you should be doing this. This thing pulled into our YouTube room area and start tearing it apart. All right, so we got this FRS on the lift. This thing is basically a blank canvas at this point. We haven't even really solidified the plan as far as like what LS is going in it, what trans we're gonna use. Actually really curious what all you guys think we should do out there, so make sure you comment, give us some suggestions. Whatever one we like the best we'll probably run with, but the sky's the limit. You know, we're gonna basically build this car front to back using all the SIKKY components. We're even gonna R&D a couple things on this particular car as we go, like the AC system. You know, we wanna get that knocked out, so basically a plug-and-play AC hose kit that will made up to GM LS style AC compressors, so make it real easy for anyone that wants to run AC. But yeah, like I said, make sure you guys give us some suggestions. Let us know what you think we should stuff under the hood of this bad boy, and we'll take it and run with it. So, but first step, obviously we got to get this boat anchor out of the front here. It's not going to do this car any good anymore. So we're going to pull this motor and go through that process. We're not going to get super detailed, like unhook this hose, undo that bolt, because if you can't pull a stock motor out of a car, you probably shouldn't be attempting to do an LS swap on your own. But we will kind of hit on some key points as needed and kind of blow through this a little bit more on the fast forward level, just so we don't bore you guys to tears. But yeah, let's get at it. All right, so we got the oil and the coolant out of the engine. I'll drink to that. Psych, kids, don't drink coolant, it's not good for you. I've got most things unhooked from the top of the engine, except I gotta decharge the AC, and we'll do that here in a sec. But I'm gonna get the hood off. You don't necessarily have to do it, but it just is nice to have all that extra room. It also lets the light come down. Just makes things a little easier, and then we'll probably get it up in the air after that and get started on unhooking the transmission, the rest of the coolant lines off the back here, and try to get to the point where we can get this transmission out of here sooner than later. All right, let's get these heater core lines unhooked. As always with these things, you want to be careful. This is like an aluminum line that this thing's hooked to, so don't crimp it or squeeze it too hard. Usually you can just get a little bit of a twist on these things and then they'll slide right off. All right, and you got to unhook this clutch line from the master to the slave. All right, so get this AC sucked out here. All right, so decharge is complete. All right, so now we can unbolt these two AC lines off the top of the compressor, kind of put them off to the side for now. We are gonna develop an AC kit while we're doing this build here, so make it nice and easy, plug and play setup for you guys down the road. All right, the rest of the AC lines can stay where they are. They'll just be out of the way when we pull this thing up out of here. All right, so now we got to get these fuel lines off. So if you have it's like a 5/16, I believe, but you have these quick disconnect style clips to get in here. They got to go underneath this plastic, and then you basically push the line in, slide that towards the line, and then pull the line off. So it's as simple as that. You can probably, if you don't have these little tools, you could probably get them at any parts store. Same thing for this side. And that's it. All right, you can see now we got pretty much everything disconnected from the top here. The only thing I want to get is the top couple bell housing bolts, and we'll move to the underside. All right, so now we get in here and crack these top couple bell housing bolts loose. And we're gonna remove the starter as well. Oh, that's not good. The thing is like finger tight. Guess somebody's had this thing apart previously. All right, so I can get a pretty good angle at the rest of these from underneath, so we're gonna move to the other side, lift this thing up. All right, so first step under the car, we're gonna get this exhaust out of the way. And we got a bracket hanging here, we gotta unhook, and then unbolt it up there by the header. So now we're gonna unbolt the cat right here. Someone clearly used German torque specs on that one. Nothing like a little good and tight. Try to use that and see if it works any magic. Sometimes you can spray with some liquid wrench, kind of work it back and forth a little bit, and it will kind of clean up enough where it'll start to get easy. It's almost like you're almost sort of like, oh, that's what's happening. So the whole stud's trying to back out on this thing. Get this whole assembly out of the way. All right, so unless you want a really stinky shower of gear oil, I recommend draining the transmission at this point. You get the plug back in. Now we don't have to worry about getting soaked. I'm gonna take this thing out, pull the drive shaft and all that. All right, so now we need to remove the 14mm bolts that are holding the drive shaft to the rear. You might have to crack these loose. They can be tight, so might not be able to get in here with smaller hand tools, but they come off pretty easy once they're loosened up. All right, so about halfway up the drive shaft, there's another joint. So we're gonna unbolt it here. And this kind of releases it from the chassis. And at this point, it's free, so just be careful. You're gonna snake it out of here. Sometimes it might be a little bit stuck on the actual diff flange. All right, once you get it off the diff flange, you're gonna lower it down and slide it out of the trans. And that's it. All right, next thing I'm gonna take off is this up pipe. You could probably get the engine out with leaving this thing on, but it's just gonna make it a little more Easy to maneuver, since this does kind of hang over the cross member and protrude into the tunnel area. And if you think about it, you pre-soak these things with some liquid wrench. I did that about 10 or 15 minutes ago, and these things are coming right off. Hope I don't just jinx myself, but so far so good. Stainless bolt would be amazing. All right, so it's free. You should be able to work it back and get it up out of here. All right, so the up pipe's a little tight in there, so I'm gonna loosen this engine mount on the passenger side. Take the nut off this side, and then jack up the motor just a little bit to get it out, since we're gonna be taking this apart anyways. Get this out of the way so it's not flopping around in here, potentially crash down on me. Voila. Now you can support the tail housing at this point, and we can unbolt these cross member bolts on the back side of this transmission here. Just take a little bit of weight off of it. All right, so I can lower this a little bit. And we got to get this shifter assembly all disconnected. All right, so next step, before we can get this trans pulled out, we got to remove the shifter. So first step, you want to spin this shift knob off counterclockwise. And once you get that knob out of the way, you can reach into the trim where the leather boot is and kind of pull up on it. There's a couple clips in there, so you got to give it a little bit of force, but once it pops up, it's pretty easy to get out. Make sure you unplug it from the back and set it aside. All right, so next step, you want to pull on the ebrake boot trim. So once that pulls and pops off of the center console, you can kind of pull up on it, get it out of the way. No need to completely remove it, so just get it out of your way and then move on to the next step. Pull your cup holder out, and in the bottom of that cup holder, there's a thin plastic sheet. It's kind of like a pad for the bottom of that box. So you're going to pull that up, and you'll see 2 bolts down in the bottom of that compartment. We're going to remove them next. They're 10 millimeter. Now you're going to remove the 2 Phillips head screws that are right behind the shifter. And then on either side of the console below the dash, there's side panels that pop off. This allows you to get a little more access to the change compartment doodad that's in front of the shifter we're going to be pulling out next. Next step, we got to pull this compartment out. It's in there pretty good. There's 3 clips in it at the top, so you just got to give it some force, and once it goes, it'll pop out pretty quickly, but you just got to position your hands, and removing those side panels in the previous step will allow you to get behind it and push from the side if you need to, but I find that if you can get your hands into the inside of it and push from the back, it's easy enough to get it to start to release and pop loose. But don't be afraid to use a little muscle on this. And then unplug the USB port when you're done. All right, so once that tray's out, you're gonna see 2 Phillips head screws that are underneath where that just was. And we're gonna back them out and get them out of the way. And at this point, the console's free, so you can pull up, and then you have to unplug a few more things from the underside. I'll get this out of the way. Alright, so next there's a bracket with 4 bolts holding down the boot itself in the trans tunnel opening. So we're going to remove them. These are 4 12 millimeter bolts. And we're going to lift this boot up and out of the way and get it disconnected. Alright, next we're going to unbolt the 4 10s that are holding the shifter plate down to the arm coming from the back of the transmission. At the bottom of the shifter, you're going to see there's a boot that covers up where the linkage connects with the shift lever. You're going to push that boot down to expose a cotter pin that comes through the side on the driver's side. So we're going to remove that pin, and now you should be able to slide the linkage out of the bottom of the shifter. Sometimes it helps to push the boot forward enough to clear it. You can see the pin sliding over, and it's almost freed from the shift lever. Once you pop that off, you can pick straight up on the shifter and completely remove it. All right, now that everything's disconnected from the shifter up top, we can go ahead and pull out these two 12s that are holding the back of this linkage up. Now you can see the shifter's all loose and hanging down. The transmission, the old engine is just teetering on the motor mounts. So we can undo the bell housing bolts now. All right, so to keep this thing from coming apart too quickly, I did put a pole jack underneath the back of the transmission just to keep it up there, but there is long studs on this bell housing that keeps it from just falling off of the transmission and, you know, moving around so much, so we can get everything out of the way. All right, now that's all the bell housing bolts, so now we can work on separating the transmission bell housing from the back of the block. All right, so once you get to pulling the trans, you might want to support the front of the motor. Again, this is totally different if you're doing this on the ground with no jack stands, but once the weight of the trans is lifted off of the back of this, the motor has a tendency to want to roll forward, and we just don't want to do any damage to anything. And ideally we'd be using a trans jack, but everything's at the front of the building, so I got to do it the old-fashioned way back here in the YouTube room. A little brute force. There's some nice little tabs up on the bell housing that give you a really good place to pry. Like I said, there's some really long studs at the bottom of this transmission that tend to make it a little more difficult to slide off, but also keep it from falling off in a hurry. Oh, there she is. Go back up there. All right, so last step underneath here, it's gonna be to get these motor mount nuts off. They're two 14 mil, one on the passenger, one on the driver's side. All right, so once you get that done, basically just look over everything, make sure there's nothing still attached. It's gonna prevent this thing from coming out, and we can move this to the top side. So there's a couple ways to do this, but I use the factory engine pulling bracket that's on here. It's got a hole, works out pretty good for most of your chain setups or whatever you want to do. And then this front bolt on the AC compressor down here, it's a bracket that holds the AC compressor to the actual engine. So it's a good balance point, nice even weight distribution, creates that like center point to pick it up. You just don't want the engine to rock and fly all over the place as you're pulling it out. So as you can see, it's coming up nice and flat, which is what we want. It's not trying to flip over or spin. Just slowly bring it up, make sure you're not catching anything on the way out. I mean, granted, we're not going to be reusing this engine or 90% of these components, but either way, don't want to destroy it if you don't need to. Oh, it looks like I missed a ground here, so there's a little 10mm grounding strap down here on the bottom. So let's get that out of the way. All right, once you got it clear, just carefully pull it forward. All right, got the engine and trans out of this thing. Really simple job actually, and I ended up showing a little bit more than I was originally planning on, but it's such a simple engine to remove. Probably out of all these years of pulling engines, probably hands down the easiest engine to remove from a factory standpoint. Everything comes out as a unit, really simple. The harness stays on the engine. And if anyone ever worked on like a 300ZX or something, you know pulling an engine can be an absolute nightmare, but this thing was a breeze. So I really wouldn't be too intimidated with pulling this engine if you've never even done it before. Just having a lift and a pole jack and a trans jack and stuff like that, it's going to make this job super easy. Not saying you can't do it on jack stands, but just be prepared for a little bit more sweating and cussing potentially. Now the next biggest problem is we've got to get this thing prepared for that engine swap. So that's going to be messing with the tunnel. There's a trans tunnel brace that we're going to remove. I'll show you guys how to do that. I'd really like to get this thing power washed too. Just it's a little dirty in there. It's just nice when you're working on something, not getting your hands filthy every 5 minutes. So we'll probably power wash that. So next episode we'll dive into the preparation of this chassis and getting it ready for the engine, which we still don't know what we're going to put in there. So again, like I said in the beginning, make sure you guys comment. Let us know what you're thinking, what you think would be badass in here, something that's going to test all the parts we're putting on here. And number one goal, something we can have some fun with in our own little backyard burn yard here, and make sure we put this car through its paces. So looking forward to getting into that. Make sure you guys like and subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss the next episode, and we'll see you next time.